Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of August 21st. I'm still Michael James. I'm here with Euan Hague. And our next guest is someone who I met in El Paso, Texas. During basketball in the barrio, we took a walk over the bridge, over the Rio Grande, into Juarez, the one and only Dave Zirin. And I'm honored to say that he asked me once to do a little blurb for his first book on Muhammad Ali. And he's been on this show before. He's a guest at the Heartland Cafe on a number of occasions when he came to town to visit his sister. And we're glad to have him today. So hello to you, Dave Zirin.
Oh, I'm so glad we can do this because my sister's now in New York City, so the opportunities have lessened greatly.
Yeah, but you're coming to Chicago, and we should let people know about that. You want to fill us in?
The big get is September 3rd at Pilsen Books. That's where I'd love for people to go. I'm also speaking at the Socialism Conference in that weekend, but I'm really excited to go to Pilsen. The book is selling well there, and that bookstore just has a terrific reputation.
Pilsen Community Books, 1531 West 18th Street. And Dave is going to be there on next Thursday. And my understanding it's a conversation between you and a rabbi named Rosen.
Yeah.
What's that all about? I mean, you're going to talk about your new book, but you're going to talk about what?
Well, Brant, we're going to talk about the book. I mean, Rabbi Rosen is I think the leading anti-Zionist Rebbe in the United States. He and I have been in conversation for a long time about not just Judaism and Israel, but really about politics. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a longtime activist. He's somebody who I'm really impressed with in so many levels. And I've been doing interviews with different people at these different stops, and I'm choosing just like a great variety of different kinds of folks to keep it fresh. Because, I'm curious. I'm just as curious as you. I don't know what angle Rabbi Rosen's going to take on this. But then, this Saturday, I'm speaking with Katia Stitt, who's the program director at WPFW Pacifica here in D.C. Just trying to vary it up a little bit so we get different questions, different political frictions. But, we're going to be talking about the book. And if we talk about Howard Zinn's Judaism, then we can talk about that too.
Yeah, we should probably tell people what the name of the book is. It's The People's Historian: The Outsized Life of Howard Zinn, just published, I believe, by Penguin. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Why Howard Zinn? Why now?
Great question. Why Howard Zinn? Because I knew him at the end of his life pretty darn well, and he passed away in 2010. I'm a sports writer by trade, as Mike said, and I had never thought I'd write a book outside that lane, really. But in recent years, I've really heard a lot of people ask me this question about what would Howard Zinn say about our current political hellscape. And I just feel like I knew Howard's story well from the times we spent together. I once said to him, what we need is a book called The People's History of Howard Zinn, because his own life story is so incredible. And yet I never really was able to think that I would write that. But and then when Donald Trump came out and attacked Zinn on the White House lawn, basically blamed him for every ill in our society, save COVID itself. I knew, and also these attacks on U.S. history by the Trump administration, banning books, going after higher learning, going after high schools, and going after Zinn specifically. I mean, they're waging war on history because they're an authoritarian government, and history shows us that authoritarians lose. So what do you do in that situation? You attack history itself. Mumi Abu Jamal, the political prisoner, I just saw him in prison, and I was talking about the book, and he said to me that they're waging a war on history because their agenda demands ignorance. And I think Howard Zinn's 70 years as both an activist and historian really does just answer a lot of the questions we're facing right now about how to ride through tyranny and come out the other end with our soul and spirit intact.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think his book, People's History of the United States will be the one that most listeners will be familiar with. It was part of a whole movement in history to try and challenge that sort of sanitized Western expansionist manifest destiny and sort of tell the truth of what happened on a day-to-day basis with American history. And I feel that's exactly the kind of, the reality that the Trump administration is currently trying to erase.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm in Washington, D.C., and the signs they've put up outside the Smithsonian, saying basically don't believe the history that you read inside. This is fascistic.
Euan was just talking about that when he went to New York. There was a sign that was like that at the Stonewall exhibit.
Yeah, and in Philadelphia as well, there's a sign that to basically say, don't believe what you're reading here about the founding fathers and slavery. They really are trying to change history because if they have us thinking that this country is about, the history of great white men who are infallible, that helps Donald Trump. Why do we think he puts up AI slop of him riding a horse with George Washington? Because he wants people to think that he's infallible as well and unbeatable. It makes him risible in the opinions of so many. I don't know if you saw the recent poll that he only has a positive approval rating in, I think, 2 or 3 states in the entire country. So it's not working, but he is, some of this I think is the fact that his brain is porridge, but he's addicted to this idea of himself as this kind of uber regime leader, an authoritarian in the tradition of the worst people of the 20th century. It's disgusting. And the politics of Zinn, I think, are so essential to building a left right now, because I don't know what y'all think, but I've got 2 kids, 18 and 22. I'm curious what you think being around people that age, but I see a lot of anger among my kids and their peer group about the system, a desire to even dismantle this system, but not a lot of hope that they could actually build something better. There's a great despondency in this generation, and I get why, but Howard Zinn lived through a lot of despondency and came out the other end, lived through various tyrannies and came out the other end. And he was able to do so not because he was some sort of pie in the sky, oh, this is the best of all possible worlds, but because he was rooted in historical study. And I think we need an optimism that's also very realist based and rooted in history, if for no other reason. So this young generation doesn't have to recreate the wheel and learn all the lessons of previous generations.
Dave, tell us a little bit more about Zinn, his life, growing up poor, being a laborer, going off to Spelman College. Fill our listeners and viewers in on that.
Yeah, it's a life that could fill 10 books. There are actually even individual vignettes in the book that I feel like could be entire volumes on their own. I said to someone recently that his life is like if Forrest Gump was directed by John Sayles, because he, like Gump, he finds himself in the middle of these incredible situations, but he's not a fool. Or a know-nothing. As John Sayles would have directed it, he's this labor historian and activist of the First Order who finds himself in the middle of these grand historical moments. So, I'll run through it in quick thumbnail fashion, but we're talking about somebody born the children of immigrants, very poor in Brooklyn, becomes a union organizer as a teenager during the Great Depression, in addition to graduating high school early with honors. And he goes to work on the naval yards. He's around a lot of radical thinkers. He reads like a maniac. Just this thirst for knowledge. And that process of being in Brooklyn in the 30s also made him, like it made so many of his generation, a real devout anti-fascist, with everything happening first in Spain and seeing people in Brooklyn going off to fight in the Spanish Civil War and the Abraham Lincoln brigades and then coming back. It made him want to fight fascism. And he saw joining World War II, the Army Air Corps, and becoming a bombardier, even though, by the way, he'd never been on a plane before, becoming a bombardier during World War II but then leaving World War II with a real disillusionment about this idea that there's anything that could be called a just war. Hiroshima and Nagasaki played a role in that. His own actions, bombing people from high in the sky, and the idea that he had bombed civilians was also very jarring and life-changing for him. So he emerges from World War II really wanting to fight for the rights of veterans and fighting for the rights of the oppressed. And he does that in New York City while married to Rosalind Schechter Zinn. They're having 2 kids together. And then he gets the attention of the Red Squad. So there's this whole chapter in the book about him getting accosted by the FBI. I read all his FBI files for doing this book. I don't want to give away too much. I want people to read the book. Like I said, I could go on and on. You've got the 50s when he's teaching at Spelman College. He's the adult advisor of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He's at the heart of the movement against the war in Vietnam. And in his 80s, he was one of the leading voices against Bush's forever wars in the Middle East. So there's so much to talk about in the book. And that's the most thumbnail of all thumbnails I can give you.
Dave, where do you think he would be at today on Gaza and that whole question, and maybe even take it to the kind of the split evolving in the Democratic Party between the progressive wing and the centrists?
Well, 2 distinct and really good questions, Mike. First of all, starting in 1967, because of the influence of both SNCC and people like Bob Moses and the Black Panther Party, he was, and of course, 67 was the Israeli-Egypt war. You have Zinn, a devout pro-Palestinian political mindset from that point on, had really not thought of the issue much before 67. Or if he did, it was like, oh, they're trying to create a kind of socialist model out of the wreckages of the Holocaust. But because they're just actually, I looked up into this, there really wasn't anything even in the left U.S. press. I mean, this is obviously decades before the internet. So how you even find out about Palestine in the United States before 67 would have been its own, you would have had to have been somebody who really was trying to search that stuff out. And that's just not where his head was. But it was really, the anti-colonial struggles, connecting that to Palestine, connecting that to the Black freedom movement in this country, and having that internationalist mindset. That's what really shaped him around Palestine. And then later in life, I think it was 1999, he actually writes this brilliant essay about the horrors of the Holocaust, but then the exploitation of the Holocaust by Zionists, and the price that we pay when we think that phrase "never again" only applies to this one historical instance, and that idea of turning inward instead of turning outward to make sure that "never again" actually is a phrase that has some teeth. Of course, it hasn't, not least of all by the Israeli state itself. In its attacks and genocide in Palestine. So that's where there's politics there. Now, as for the split in the Democratic Party, I think that's sort of a complicated question, because I do think he would have been, very happy to see the DSA, to see the left really connect, particularly with young people. Like, he would have felt a great sense of hope about that. But he also had a great skepticism of electoral politics. And I think he would stand with the idea that even if the DSA member of your dreams is elected in your local office, if there's not a movement to keep their spine straight, then the very sort of right-wing semi-inertia of the U.S. political system would inevitably pay a toll on that person. So, he once said it matters less who's sitting in the White House than who's sitting in. And I think that was a core belief he held his entire life.
Did you talk to him? I mean, I know you said you met him, previously, and then obviously have researched his life. But what was the impetus or the process to write his famous People's History of the United States?
Yeah, we spoke about that too. I mean, the book comes out in 1980, and if you think about it, that's an incredible zag in terms of the zigzag of this country, because 1980, Reagan, the death of the 1960s being announced, the conservative revolution, the detritus of which still chokes us today. And in that climate, he writes this opus of a radical history text looking at U.S. history through the eyes of the oppressed. Now, it's not like he was the first person to write a people's history or the first person to use the phrase people's history. By my research, that really does come out of the 1970s, particularly with the bicentennial in 76.
Right. That makes sense.
Of people trying to say, well, let's look at U.S. history in a different kind of a way. 76 still close enough to the 60s that these ideas were really percolating still at that time. And so his book was really a culmination of what he had learned, what he had read, and what he had experienced. And it was able to he was 58 years old, and yet somehow it was really able to connect with a whole several generations of people, particularly before the internet, who couldn't go to TikTok to find politics that was off the beaten path. But that book, I remember when I was coming up politically, that was the book everybody had read. I was thinking about what were like the books when I was coming up, and it was that and the revival of the autobiography of Malcolm X. It was thought that if you hadn't read those two books, you just weren't even part of the conversation that was happening. Certainly there were other texts. Angela Davis's book about women, race, and class was a huge one as well. But if we're talking about like that sort of broad popular intervention in how we were thinking about the world, it was Howard Zinn and it was Malcolm X. And so it became like this common language. But I got to tell you, the reason why it's survived to this day, the reason why it's sold 4 million copies is because it's taught in high schools and in colleges. And one history teacher said to me, I'm no radical, but I do know that Howard Zinn is the only thing that keeps my kids off their phones.
Mm-hmm. And there's this effort again now with textbook wars. We're back in textbook wars, which we were in the 1980s. I think these obviously there's been debates in Texas about textbooks and which historical figures we should highlight in those textbooks. And that's happening, as we talked about earlier, national parks, and you mentioned the Smithsonian. His voice is as urgent as ever. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. There's an urgency, and it doesn't even have to be him, because I do think one of his legacies is that his work has allowed 100 flowers to bloom.
Right.
There's so many amazing historians doing that kind of work from below in this day and age. And those are the very people who a lot of teachers are having to smuggle into their classrooms. There's a book called Smuggling Pedagogy. I might be getting the title wrong, but it's like people have to, like teachers are having to be surreptitious to bring these ideas in the classroom in many states. But it's something that really captures the imagination of their students. And for a lot of teachers, that makes it worth it. And I think it captures the imagination so much. And this goes really more clearly to your question, Euan, but it makes you feel like you're the subject of history instead of the object. You're not the person things happen to, but you're somebody who can be part of the motor of how the world changes. I really do think that's what connected so strongly with folks.
Dave, what has been the response to your book? And is there any people out there or in your own being that kind of shift from writing all these sports books to doing a book like this?
Well, there have been few people who've said, what the hell are you doing, than I thought there would be. Not that hasn't happened. But I got to tell you, I've been so encouraged by the reception to the book. I'm not just saying that. The thing that I feel the most in my heart is when people read it and they say, this is the right book for the right time. Because that was the whole point. Is to say, wait a minute, it's not just about this guy's outsized life, but it's about the lessons for us today that are so critical. And putting that book together, it was a challenge. I worked on it for 6 years. I put a lot of things to the side to be able to write it. And it was, I dedicated the book to my mom because, she had a lengthy illness and then passed away during those 6 years. So, it was a real trial. I almost quit it several times, returned the advance. So, I got to tell you, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I'm thrilled. And I never thought I'd say that while I was writing it.
Let me throw in here before we run out of time that you're going to be in Chicago, the center of the universe, on Thursday, September 3rd, this year, 2026, from 7 o'clock on at Pilsen Community Books, 1531 West 18th Street. And you are going to be there along with Rabbi Brant Rosen, and you're going to have a discussion. So we encourage everyone to go on out. And now that I've put that out there, can I ask you a sports question?
Absolutely, Mike James.
One of the things that is going on, is this controversy, this kind of black and white controversy in the women's basketball, WNBA. What are your thoughts on that and any comments?
My thoughts is that this is pure, unadulterated, right-wing exploitation of an issue that does not actually exist. They don't want to talk about the fact that their great leader is floundering and looking like a porridge-headed idiot. They don't want to talk about how much gas prices are costing. They don't want to talk about this absurd, wasteful, horrid war in Iran. What they want to talk about above all else is the possibility that a trans athlete could play in the WNBA. By the way, a league and a sport that before all of this, they didn't give two craps about. So this is all an incredible okey doke as a way to distract and divide people. All they know how to do is give new people to hate on a given week. So it'll be the WNBA this week and it'll be somebody else next week. It's revolving hatreds. And that's all they can really offer at this point because they're not offering much else.
Dave, you were, before the World Cup came to the States and to Mexico and Canada, you were pretty critical and saying it should be canceled. I, of course, got right in line with you on that. It actually got pulled off pretty smoothly in some respects, I think. Euan is a big soccer fan or football fan and does play football regularly, starting back in Scotland. What are your thoughts on how the World Cup turned out?
Well, I got to say, we always have to do caveats before I generally agree with you about the smoothness of it. To say it wasn't smooth for the Iranian team. No, it wasn't smooth for the Somali referee who was sent home. It wasn't smooth for the people who did run into ice along the way and had to deal with that. There was a lot of ugliness that went under or unreported in the particular U.S. hosting. And to be clear, my position was not cancel the World Cup. It was just send it all to Canada and Mexico. And cut the U.S. out, please, for the safety of everyone. But it was also just the U.S. didn't deserve to host it. Just a rogue nation clearly exploiting FIFA and the incredibly sycophantic relationship between FIFA boss Gianni Infantino and Donald Trump. And I got to say, as smooth as we say it went, the refereeing between Egypt and Argentina was an absolute abomination. And the fact that Trump got the red card pulled from the U.S.'s best player was a disgusting, brazen show of corruption.
I take it back.
That stained U.S. soccer. And let me tell you something. The best thing to ever happen to U.S. soccer was losing that next game in such embarrassing fashion. Because if they had won, the only story would have been about how corrupt it all was.
And I think, they lost that game because of the overturning of the card.
Agreed.
One of the reasons, there was others in tactics and so forth, but I actually think it changed the whole impetus. I think it changed the vibe around the American team. It gave Belgium, who'd looked almost down and out previously against, was it Senegal that this great past? Belgium were there for the taking, and I think the U.S. if the U.S. had just gone in that game without any of the Balogun stuff and the red card, it would have been different. But I think it actually came back to bite them, and I think most of world soccer saw it as Trump's influence rather than anything particularly U.S. soccer did. But it just left a bad taste.
It does leave a bad taste, and there's so much more to say about it. The one thing I'll say is that the team was being regarded as plucky and really interesting before then. Yeah. That's what I mean about the stain on USA Soccer. And if they had lost without Balogun, they would have been remembered that way as a really positive intervention into the cup. And instead, they left with a lot of shame and a lot of the players saying if Trump hadn't intervened, we would have had a better vibe.
Dave Zirin, you're a wonderful guy, and we're so thankful that you came on live from the Heartland. We want to thank everybody.